possessions, find a way to lose the game. And 3 years ago, they had a 2-14 record, which was the worst in professional football. They followed that with another consecutive 2-14. Last year, they're 6-10, and then to turn it around this year, they're now 15-3. It's an amazing turnaround.
They were awfully lucky this time too.
Yeah, 6 turnovers and still won the game.
Okay.
So I was manager of the college football team.
Oh, were you?
So I've been around it for a long time, one way or another.
Here in Chattanooga or elsewhere?
No, in Pennsylvania.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we'll just launch in here and take it one by one and see what we come up with. Again, the first one I would like a response on food, how it was obtained in the sense of gardens, a lot of it homegrown, and also the preparation for meals and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So we're ready when you are. I'll stand here.
Growing up in a small town where the number of retail stores were not very numerous, it was necessary for everybody to make his own plans and to make his own preparations for food supplies. I remember at my home, we used to get in bushels of potatoes every fall, store them in the basement. There'd be a barrel of sweet potatoes, and in addition to that, a tub of salt mackerel, along with a lot of other things from the seacoast, including a bushel or so of Chesapeake oysters in the shell. This was always a delight, and of course it's very different from anything that one would do today. And I remember how at my home, one day a week was the baking day. This is when you made cake and pie for the whole week, and with a large family it was necessary to do it this way. It's also interesting that merchandising was so very, very different. I can recall the butcher who traveled around in a car and sold his meat by the side of the street. The milkman did the same thing. The grocer came by with his pad to make out a list of what he would deliver later in the day.
Okay, that's fine. Now, if we can continue just a bit, if you would talk about the actual preparation as to the cooking of the meal. Now, maybe you don't have that acquaintance. Maybe, the wife or the mother did most of the cooking. But if you could give some time thing where now it takes 15, 20 minutes, a half hour to cook up a meal, whip up a meal, then it maybe was something that started the night before and continued, and you ate at 4 or 5 the next night. It was a 12-hour process or something.
Well, in a fairly large family, cooking, of course, occupied my mother's time most of the day. There would be breakfast to prepare. There would be lunch, because all of us walked home from school, even though we had to hike for a mile or two. There's always home for lunch, and there was a short period of time when everything had to be ready, and you had to take care of all the needs in a very, very short period of time. Then in addition, of course, you had the evening meal. Usually, for example, on a Sunday, the big meal of the day was at noontime, and the evening meal was something in the order of a snack. But in my part of the country, we had a tradition, especially during the winter season, when you had a standard special breakfast for Sunday morning. This was fried potato and salt mackerel.
That's real good. Okay, now if you'll tell us a bit about Sunday meals and how, the festivity behind Sunday meals and whatnot. And if I could ask one...
I don't believe I have anything special on that that would help you at all.
Okay, fine. Were they crocheted, knitted, woven, types of materials, and the homemade emphasis versus store-bought?
No, I can't give you anything that would be of any color in regard to that either.
Okay, let's talk.
Yes.
Just be a second after he's ready.
All right.
Well, when we moved to Chattanooga in 1937 and moved into this home, all the hot water that we used had to be prepared by firing up a monkey stove. This was a small potbelly type of thing in the basement, which was the biggest nuisance in the world. Any of you who have had any experience with the potbelly stove, the monkey heater, would know that what I'm saying is absolutely true. The heating of homes in this area was largely by bituminous coal. The bituminous coal from domestic furnaces, along with the smoke that was generated by businesses in Chattanooga, produced the blackest kind of snow that one could ever see. Many people today complain about Chattanooga being a smoky city with bad air situation. Actually, what has happened here in Chattanooga in the last 15, 20 years has been a miracle. It has cleaned up the place beyond any possible conception of people who lived here in the 1920s and 30s.
Okay, real good, Bill.
Well, I'll give you a little different story than that. I think it'll be better.
All right.
See how I want to get it. When my dad was a young fella, he ran away from home because his parents wouldn't buy him a high-wheel bicycle, and went and lived with my grandparents for the rest of his life. With this kind of an outlook on things, it wasn't surprising that he had an early automobile. And I can remember that old car very vividly. The old crank. When evening came, you got out with some matches and went around and lit the lights. You put on the curtains when the breezes got bad or when it began to rain, and you sat on the gas tank because the gas tank was under the cushion of the front seat. If it rained too much and the coils got wet, of course, you couldn't go. This was quite a car. It was an old Ford, one of the very early vintage Fords. And of course, everybody along the street stopped and watched you go by. It was an interesting kind of thing from that point of view. This must have been a few years after Chattanooga had the experience of its one of its most important athletic or sporting events in its history. Along in April of 1909, the Lookout Mountain Automobile Club sponsored a mountain climb race from St. Elmo to the top of the mountain. It was about 5 miles with many, many curves on a gravel road, as you can imagine. One of those curves was called a Dead Man's Delight, and another one was a Spine Tingler, and so on. Well, they brought in a racing crew from the Buick Motor Company, along with a lot of other sporting people from all over the country. Many of the cars couldn't race because they were too big to get around the curves on the mountain. But it's interesting that crowds gathered all up and down that highway, and there was one ambitious fellow who even tried to sell insurance. Not to the drivers, but to the crowd along the road. Their life might be in danger from the cars themselves. Well, the best time was made by one of the Buick drivers. Interestingly enough, his name was Louis Chevrolet. Then I can recall, too, when I was in college, this was in the 1930s, one of my fraternity brothers had an old T-model Ford. It was a sedan. We called it the China cabinet because of the tremendous amount of glass in the thing. But we used to visit one of the girls' schools about 30 miles from our campus on Sunday afternoon, drive down the Lincoln Highway. There was a mountain between the two towns, and the car that we used wasn't powerful enough to cross the mountain in first gear or second gear. So we would turn around Sunday afternoon traffic on the Lincoln Highway and back over the mountain.
those in today's time.
All right. Before the time when automobiles were very common and it was difficult for people to get around, many events in an individual's life had to be geared to some different kind of arrangement. This was particularly true in the case of funerals. Relatives came from a distance. Many of them had to come by horse and carriage, or might even come by horseback. This meant that the people who were next of kin had to be prepared to accommodate these people as visitors, and also to accommodate them as relatives and friends whom they hadn't seen for a long time. As a consequence, the funeral became not only a burial ceremony, but it became a matter of a family reunion. I can recall when my grandfather died, we put up a lot of tables in the side yard and had a family dinner following the service. This was done because it was the only time most of these people had a chance to get together, and it was done because many of them had a long journey to make after the service was over.
Fine. Just out of curiosity,